state of democracy, a state of pluralism and of successful integration. A state that endlessly develops cutting-edge technology, world-class culture, and more than anything, is a state that relies on values and moral to find inspiration, motivation, and power, to continue and even set the tone against all odds. We have joined forces with the Embassy of Israel and the World Zionist Organization in order to give you the latest information as well as innovative strategies of how to do what you do best: promote, defend, and tell the story of Israel. We want you to feel empowered. We want you to continue and be active, be influential and supportive of the State of Israel and of the people who support Israel here in Sweden and in Europe. We want you to feel engaged, encouraged, and appreciated for the wonderful work that you do. With no further ado, I would like to present Israel Ambassador to Sweden, Mr. Yitzhak Bachman, to say a few welcoming words.
Good afternoon to all of you. You just think you know how pleasant it is to be here with you. It is much more pleasant than what you imagine. To have the possibility to stand here with a group of people that advocate for Israel and stands up with answers, clarifications, and always upstream and against the stream. It is very much appreciated that you are here. Since I'm active on the Facebook and I have my own Facebook page and I have my posts there, I have a kind of acquaintance with many of you, if not all of you, through this activity, and I can see what you are posting on your pages, and I think that this is part of the activity we are aiming to promote. It is not easy to be Israel in Europe today, let alone represent the State of Israel. There are things that we at the embassy cannot do as well as you will do. We represent the official face of Israel and the official positions of the State of Israel. There are things that for politically correctness and for cultural differences we are not supposed to bring up. We don't have the freedoms that you enjoy when you express yourselves. So I hope that together we will be able to work out a kind of mutual expressions. On one hand, the embassy would take the track, the official track, and bring up the official positions of the State of Israel. It's not always clear at a given moment when there are events, evolving events and breaking news coming up, what are the positions of the State of Israel. We'll keep you informed and fill you with those positions. And you'll be able to take it to where we can't. And this is the idea. A double track. Again, thank you for your presence, for your past work and for your future work. I want to thank Miri Eisen. For me, it's Colonel Miri Eisen. She probably is very familiar to you through international CNN, international news of different kinds. And she was on camera many times in very delicate moments of events in the Middle East, and she does very well what she's doing, and this is the reason she's here and the reason that she's still going to Miluim in Israel. I want to thank Uri, the Deputy Chief of Mission, number 2 at the embassy, for his energies to bring about this event, to Galit Peleg, that came from our colleague from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, that came especially for this event to present how Jerusalem look at things on a more Israeli globalized point of view. Meanwhile, we bring in the input as to the Swedish aspects. Thank you very much, and I hope we'll have a fruitful and interesting activity. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador, for your engaging words. I would like to welcome Ms. Saskia Pantel, Vice President of the Zionist Federation of Sweden. Saskia brought into life the Union of Jewish Students in Uppsala, and she is an elected Vice Chair of EUJS, the European Union Jewish Student. She would also give a few welcoming words on behalf of our organization, and will also give us an interesting update on what's going on.
Thank you, Edith. So my name is Saskia, and I am the Vice Chair of this Zionist Federation. And I've also been working these last couple of years together with the Shaliach, Jonathan Schimmel, from the World Zionist Organization. And a lot of people get a little bit confused. The WZO and the ZF, which is the Zionist Federation. So basically, I just wanted to take a very quick moment to explain this. The Zionist Federation is an umbrella organization in Sweden for all the Zionist organizations and activities here. And we are a part of the World Zionist Organization from Jerusalem. But we also have the WZO here, and this is a great thing, in my opinion. We've been able to work together, and we've done these activities for students. When I was in Uppsala, we did something called J Talks. Initially, it was named Z Talks, Zionist Talks, but as an entry to get people to explore this Z word and about Israel and about just anything, if it's a responsibility to think this way or that way about Israel just for being Jewish. And to give you an update on that, we're actually taking this a step further. And we're creating something that's called Zionistisk Ungdom, which is in English would be ZF Sweden Youth, or WZO Sweden Youth. And we have some flyers here and also out in the hallway about how to contact us if you want to get involved with this, and also if you know someone that might be interested. Maybe you have a cousin or a daughter or someone that may be into this. I know we have some people here that already signed up, so we're very excited about that. And yeah, so if you have any questions about that, I'll be around in the break. Please ask, get involved. And again, we're looking forward to more initiatives like this in Sweden. And from the Zionist Federation and WZO, thank you, Miri, so much for coming here, and thank you to the embassy for doing this with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Saskia, for the uplifting and encouraging update. Our next speaker is former Colonel Miri Eisen. Miri is one of Israel's foremost commentators, speaking on regional geopolitics and security-related issues in the media worldwide. She teaches at the Interdisciplinary Center in Herzliya and is a senior fellow at the Center of International Communication at Bar-Ilan University. Miri will give a presentation of Israel's delegitimization in European new media, background and coping strategy. Please welcome Miri.
So whenever I'm introduced and then I stand up and I start talking, I do have to start with the first apology. My native language, and I probably am one of the only ones in the room, my native language is English. And I have a tendency when I really get into it to speak very quickly. And I know that I'm here in Sweden, it's my first time here. When I start running off and I'm talking too fast, tell me, I'll slow down, I'll repeat myself. And I feel very honored to be here right now inside this beautiful room with the synagogue across the way. I get to see it out of the side of my view. And I think I'm in Sweden, and it's 2013. And when I talk about the challenges that you face here in 2013 in Sweden, what I want to try to do before the representative that came here from Israel to talk about ongoing things that you can do, I want to give you a little bit of background. And when I talk about the background, it's not a history lesson. It's one which is the idea is to give you tools and ideas how to bridge over into your audiences. And I started with the new, oops, okay, I actually wanted to be on that one. There I am, okay. And I want to start with the New York Times. And I'm looking at the New York Times, and I'm looking at the New York Times that was printed on May 15th, 1948. And I'm showing in the New York Times from May 14th, 1948, because every once in a while when I look at this front page, it reminds me of all of the challenges that we face in the media nowadays, because this is an issue of words, and I'm going to talk about the words in a moment, about the pictures that are put next to the words themselves, and afterwards there's the rest of the page that most of us don't always read. On May 15th, 1948, in the United States of America, which was relatively very Zionist at the time, the headline of the New York Times was the following: Zionists proclaim new state of Israel. Now you're here in Sweden. How are you vilified? What's the negative term that's used for you when you stand up and speak, you Zionist you? And in 1948, when the New York Times wanted to describe the establishment of the State of Israel, and remember, it's May of 1948, the bulk of Jewry worldwide lived outside of Israel. On May 15th, 1948, there were in and around 600,000 Jews that lived in the historic land of Palestine, and when they wanted to write the headline, not the article, the headline of the New York Times, they had to differentiate, to distinguish between the Jews, of which there were lots of, and between the Zionists who had proclaimed the State of Israel. And that was a distinction. They couldn't call it in 1948, Jews proclaim new State of Israel, because most of the Jews were not in Palestine, in Israel, to proclaim it at all. When I point out the fact that in 1948 Zionism was not a negative word, it's to point out that words are terms that change. You know better than anybody else what the words are in Swedish culture, which are the words that trigger an argument, which are the words that make a difference. In 1948, when they wanted to describe the situation, not only did they talk about proclaiming new state of Israel, why do you have to say new state of Israel? Because nobody knew until May 14th, 1948, what the name of the state would be. The truth is that most people thought it was going to be called Judah, and it wasn't called Judah. There were all sorts of different names that came up at the time. But if you take that and you put it into today's term, the first thing is that you have to look at the words and put them into the context of their time. I'm going to take it a step further. Okay, I'll do that. I'll fall over it at some stage. And I want you to take a note of the second headline, which was posted in Israel. But wait a minute, it's the Palestine Post. And when we talk about Israel and about Israel advocacy, and when we start having conversations with people worldwide about Israel today, again, the context is very important. Because in May of 1948, and in this case, again, on May 16th, 1948, because this was the Jewish newspaper that was not published on May 14th, Shabbat, it was published on May 16th, because May 14th was Friday afternoon. May 15th was Shabbat, and they only published this edition on May 16th, 1948. But look at it, the Palestine Post. The Palestine Post is one of the sources that many people who follow Israel today use day in, day out. Today it's known as the Jerusalem Post. When did the name of the newspaper that's the Jewish newspaper under the Palestinian British mandate was called the Palestine Post? That was the name of the land from the time of the British mandate until the establishment of the State of Israel. And it's the Palestine Post that's talking about the State of Israel being born. And look at how terms can change. In Israel, for Israelis, the term Palestine is a challenging one. It's a political one. If you use the word Palestine, or if you use the word Palestinians, already gives you an almost political connotation. If I use Palestine, it immediately means that the person talking with me in Hebrew, in Israel, knows my political opinions. If I use the term Palestinians, it shows you in a different light. But in 1948, Palestine Post was the Jerusalem Post of today. They only changed the name at the end of 1949. For over a year after the establishment of the State of Israel, it continued to be the Palestine Post in the State of Israel. And what I want to try and present to you now is the basic Israel image in the world, and I'm going to split it into two periods. And the only reason I'm giving you this historical background is because of its relevance to our discussing and presenting and talking about Israel in Europe, in the media nowadays. And basically I'm splitting it into two parts. The basic image of the State of Israel from 1948 and until and including the 1967 Six-Day War was pretty much the image of Exodus. So I'll ask you here, how many people here remember seeing a movie called Exodus that came out in 1962? How many people here saw Exodus? Okay? Those who haven't, go take it out. It's at the movie. You know, you could take it out on Netflix, whatever you have here. Why do I say that? Because Exodus is a movie that came out in 1962. For those who don't know, in 1963 it won the Oscar. It was the best movie in 1963. It is a movie which is all about the establishment of the new state of Israel. And for a large degree, for people 50 and over, and as I looked at the room, it was interesting to see who raised their hand. And I'm giving it as a number, not because it's an exact science, but people 50 and over have a memory, have a sense of Israel kind of like Exodus, of Israel being the small country fighting the Arab states. It's very stereotypical. It shows the Jew and the main Israeli that's shown there, Paul Newman. And we know all Israelis are blue eyes and blonde. It fits into Sweden, right? But the main pioneer, Israeli, he's a pioneer at a kibbutz. He's not only on a kibbutz, but he's a fighter. It's the combination of those two together which are showing that's the Israel which many people aged 50 and over have some memory of. And there are those that to this day view Israel in the Exodus eyes. And you get that discrepancy, that gap between people who were in Israel in the 1950s or 60s and in the 1970s, and I'll talk about that as we go along, in the 1970s and 80s, that if you want to talk about the way they view Israel, the way they show it in their image, it's going to be that Exodus view, the view of the good-looking, strong, nice soldier who's also a pioneer, that when you look at it, you smile. That was Israel's international image, clear-cut, until 1967. The 1967... in those years, the most covered media event in Israel from 1948 until 1967 was the Eichmann Trial in 1961. During those months of the trial itself and then in the aftermath of his execution, it was the only time when Israel from the outside was being focused on. And think about what that means when it comes to Israel's image. The image of the fighter, the nice fighter, the one that makes you smile. The image of the pioneer, the kibbutznik, the combination of the pioneer and the fighter, and in the background, the Holocaust. That's Israel until 1967. Those are the elements that come together and are shown in Israel in the world. Ben Gurion was a symbol upon himself. Moshe Dayan is a figure, or I like to call him Patch Guy, was a symbol upon himself. But they were the symbols that showed the pioneer, that showed the construction of the country, that showed the new country, that showed all of these elements together, and that is Israel of 1948 until 67, until and including the Six-Day War. Again, if I show you Europe at the time, and I show just focused on the 1956 war, the element that I'm trying to emphasize also here is that Israel's international image between this time period and Israel's self-image at that time period were the same. What do I mean? Israelis viewed themselves as the David versus Goliath. And the world, in this case it's a Swiss newspaper, but the world viewed Israel in a similar way. Until and including 1967, Israel was the David in a very positive note, in the Goliath of the Arab world. And the cartoons from 1967 show it in the most clear-cut way, where you have Gamal Abdel Nasser, and just today, I don't know how much you're all, I'm sure you're following it all, but in the geopolitics of our area, General Sisi, who is now the, kind of think of what I should call him, but for the moment I am going to call him the military dictator of Egypt right now, who may or may not run to be the new Egyptian president, is very much using Gamal Abdel Nasser as the symbol that he's trying to emulate. He's trying to show himself as being a new Gamal Abdel Nasser. But you can see in the cartoon from 1967, that's actually a cartoon from June 1st, 1967, in the Egyptian newspaper El Ahram, and you could see what could be more negative, stereotypical Jewish than the Jew being kicked out there by the combined forces of Egypt, and behind them Syria, and behind them Lebanon, and behind them Iraq, all together, which means that in that international media image, when they're showing Israel as the small, plucky David, Moshe Dayan, who just knocked down Gamal Abdel Nasser, the correlation again, the image itself is the same. Israel views itself as the David versus Goliath of the Arab world, and the world views Israel as the David and the Goliath of the Arab world. From now on, everybody needs to do yoga. You take deep breaths. It's going to get not as pleasant, is the way I get to say, okay? Because from this world of this image, I am going to transition into the international media image of Israel in the world. And when I say the world, my focus is Western and Northern Europe, because the heart of it is here. Everybody else kind of copies in that sense, but it's here, where we are right now. Sweden is at the heart of it. The two core image issues are of Sweden and of the UK. They're the two that give the most dominant one. And so I'm going to leave you with the nice one, okay? And we're going to transition. Because what happened over a period of 20 years, not overnight, not because of one event, not because of one war, but over a period of 20 years, from the end of the Six-Day War, from the David versus Goliath, from the last time that they're going to show a good-looking, blue-eyed, nice, smiling Israeli soldier on the cover of any kind of newspaper in the Six-Day War. In later days, that young man at the bottom there smiling in the Suez Canal waters will become a general, and Yossi Ben Hanan, every once in a while I meet him and I tell him that I have this beautiful picture of him from Life magazine on the cover, and he's like, oh, I was young then, because he's, of course, that was, 1967, but he's already a general, a retired general. But when you look at those pictures, 20 years of transition, and Israel will transition from the David to the Goliath. For the last 25 years, because this process ended in 1987 in the First Intifada. It didn't happen in the First Intifada. It was a gradual process that happened in the late 60s, throughout the 1970s, and it ended in the First Intifada in 1987, so it's a 20-year time period. The international image of Israel changed completely. And in its changing, where Israel becomes the Goliath versus the David, the framing changes completely. Israel to a large degree, Israelis to a large degree, and often Israel advocates that I speak to worldwide still view Israel as the David and the Goliath of the Arab world. But in the media, especially in the European media, the framing of Israel for the last 25 years, that's a generation. 25 years means that people 30 and under, and even 40 and under, have never seen a different image. And the image that they see is completely different. I'm going to go through into that changed image and talk about the implications. And as I do so, I just want to point out that the change in image that happened to Israel had to do with a new player in the media. I'm not talking now about the politics and resolutions. I'm talking about the media. From the late 60s, throughout the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s, and by the way, until his death in November 2004, and no, I won't be sitting, yard-site for him in another few weeks' time, because it'll be, in November. But Yasser Arafat, and these covers that I'm showing you here are covers of magazines, both here and here. It's covers for magazines in 1968. And the change, viewing Israel, which I said, it's a gradual process. One of the main elements of the change is the arrival of a new, different issue, which is, as it says there, the Palestinians, Palestinian Arabs, etc. I mean, and at the top portion it says here, Arab commandos. I could talk extensively about the words again, because the words have importance, but here's the big change. Because in Europe, in the late 60s, in the 70s, terrorist organizations were something that were out there. I don't know anything about Sweden. I feel very ignorant. It's my first time here, and I don't feel I prepared myself. But today, I did the 2-hour trip. I went around your very beautiful city, and for me, the sun came out. It was very lovely here today. And on the little audio that I was listening today here for the 2 hours on the hop-on, hop-off tour, it told me that Sweden has not fought a war for 200 years. And I'm assuming that that also means that in the years that there was the Baader Meinhof, and there were the Red Brigades, and there were the IRA, that you didn't have your own local Swedish terrorist organization. And I'm not saying this, I'm just pointing out a fact. I just assume. Because the time period when Yasser Arafat, when the Fatah, when the Palestine Liberation Organization, when all of these new different terrorist organizations are coming out, the PFLP, and I can give you all these different names, they're coming out into a world which is looking at them in a different media view. And what happens vis-a-vis about the Israelis, what happens with the Israelis in our international image, is that we transition from being the David to the Goliath. And from 1987, from the First Intifada, the view of the world of Israel is through the eyes of Israel against the Palestinians, and not of Israel against the Arab world. Now, if you're responding and you're thinking of Israel in the Arab world, some of people say Israel in the Muslim world, there are all sorts of different contexts. But the person that you're talking to has only seen Israel in a framing and a context of Israel versus the Palestinians, then your response sometimes will be almost inappropriate. It won't fit. It won't work with the person that you're trying to have any kind of conversation with. I want to add in 2 additional points. I apologize up front. Graphic photos, never any fun. I'm skipping for a moment some of these. And I'm skipping directly into the 1982 First Lebanon War. In 1967, during the Six-Day War, Israel was shown very clearly as the David versus Goliath of that time period. It can be taken out of context today. I'm talking about the media at the time. At the time, that's the way it was viewed. In 1982, it was the first time that Israel made what is called a war of choice. It was considered a war of choice by Israelis. It was presented as a war of choice by the world. In the European post-war values, post-World War II values, post-colonial values, as it was viewed at the time in post-war Europe, a war of choice was a very challenging issue. Now, I couldn't put up here Swedish pages because I don't put up in languages that I don't know. But you can go and look up in your own resources of the changing point. If I said that there isn't a day when Israel's international media image changed in those 20 years from 1967 to 1987, there is one weekend where it almost did to a certain degree. And that's the weekend of the Israeli Jewish New Year, of the Jewish New Year of 1982, the weekend in September of 1982 when the massacre in Sabra and Shatila took place. And in the context of what I'm talking about, a media image of the framing of who's the good guy, of who's the bad guy, of who's the victim, of who's the aggressor, the weekend of the 14th to 16th of September 1982, worldwide, at the forefront in Northern Europe, both Sweden and Norway, of Israel as the very aggressive Goliath, with all of the mistakes and erroneous lies that are told about that, but those images are images that stayed in a very strong way. Added point. The ambassador said that one of the challenges of being in the official is what you can and can't say. So my distinct advantage today is that I was very official for many years, and now I'm not. And so I can address the elephant in the room when it comes to Israel's media image. And here I'd like you to understand the gap between the Israeli perception of itself and the way that both in the European media and for most of the counterparts they view us. In 1986, the British Sunday Times published a very broad expose in their Sunday newspaper about Israel's nuclear capability. The nuclear capability, as it was portrayed there, has been quoted, requoted, and reprinted worldwide many times over. 1986. Now, to understand gaps in perception in Israel, our official response on Israeli nuclear issues, and this is the official response, is that Israel will not be the first to introduce nuclear capability to the Middle East. Now we get to the gaps in perception. It's one of those sentences afterwards we can have a symposium on what the sentence means. But in the media, for the last 25 years since this expose, in the media, which is looking at a world without nuclear weapons, in the media where the issue of the nuclear of Israel is portrayed as a fact, there's an enormous gap in perception. Because Israelis don't discuss Israel as having any nuclear capability. In the Israeli media, both because of censorship and because of self-censorship, the issues that are presented in the world are only presented in the world. We talk about everything on our media. We have political programs there. We sit and we dissect everything. This is the last of the sacred cows. Now think of the gap in perception. Here we are in a country where Sweden does not have military nuclear capability. In the world today, when they talk about the issues of nuclear capability, every single program, I watch these all of the time, and when they want to go on and they want to show it in that sense, they go like this. The United States wants to work with Russia to cut down on military nuclear capability. So the TV program, the expose will go the following. Russia, this is to make you feel comfortable because I saw that you're near Russia. Russia has given around 15,000 nuclear warheads. Lovely number. The United States of America, this is what they always show, the United States of America has in and around 14,000 nuclear warheads. The two of them together can destroy Earth many, many, many times over, okay? That's 1 and 2. Then they go down the list and they talk about the next 3, which are China, France, and Great Britain. And the 3 of them each have several hundred apiece. And then, because they want to be, those are the 5 that are known. And then they say, and India has nuclear capability, Pakistan has nuclear capability, not as well known, and then Israel. Every single program, expose, magazine, the people that you're talking to, they all know that Israel has nuclear capability. But in Israel, this is a sacred cow that's not talked about. There is no official response. And again, I'm doing this talking about what's in the media. Now, when you take the fact that from 1986, the world knows that Israel is nuclear, when you get to 1987, and you get to the stage of the First Intifada, and you get to the changing of the framing, so that it's not about Israel versus the Arabs, Israel versus the arena, Israel within the Arab world, but rather it's nuclear Israel versus the Palestinians. For the last 25 years, the framing in the media of the Israeli image is of a framing which is Israel versus Palestine. And here, I want to break it down into 3 points, which I think are the most important ones for all of you who stand up and advocate and on these gaps, which become very challenging when you're talking with your counterparts. When I say that in the media here in Sweden, the framing of the issue, for the last 25 years it's been that way. By the way, not necessarily before that. But certainly in the last 25 years, since the First Intifada, and that's, as I said, a generation's time, the framing is based on the following elements. Element number 1. The reason there is violence, see the pictures of violence? The reason there is violence is because of the Occupation, you all know the lame. Now I take that sentence, the reason there is violence is because of the occupation. And when I take that sentence and I continue it, if you end the occupation, you end the violence. What could be more simple? Now think of the framing. Every time Israel is in the news, it's because of violence. The reason there is violence? Occupation. End the occupation, you end the violence. That's the framing. When I say it as a framing as words, and I'll talk in a moment about what you do in addressing those kind of words, it's not just words, it's all about images. In the media world, and it doesn't matter if it's the new media, in the different social media where things are going through, or in traditional media online, I'm not even talking nowadays anymore, very little about the print newspapers, but about what we all watch and read and do online. When you look at the images, pictures are worth 1,000 words. We look at the picture, and then we read the headline, and then, if it's interesting, we go in and read the whole article. For the last 25 years, the images are, the violence is because of occupation, end the occupation, you end the violence. And what are the symbols of occupation? As I like to put it, me, right? Soldiers are the symbol of occupation. Now, when I stand up and it's not a question of correcting, I'm not a former colonel, I'm still a colonel, right? I do reserve duty. I'm a reserve colonel, but I served for over 20 years. When I go around and people say to me that I am the symbol of occupation, and I kind of think to myself, what does that mean? But you have to put it into the context of the way it's being presented. Every Israeli soldier is considered to be the symbol of occupation. How do you show it? You show it with a soldier who is dressed in full gear. Now, I served in the military for most of my adult life. When I look at a soldier, I expect to see him in full gear, to have the body armor, to have a helmet on his head, to have the weapon and ready. That's what you do when you're a soldier. This is a question of looking at it. But if I come into a culture where the idea of the use of force in any case is seen in a negative way, and for the last 25 years, we know, the world, that the reason there's violence is because of the occupation, and the symbol of the occupation is the soldier, then the most vilified part of Israel becomes the Israeli soldier. Now, it's very visual, and I'm going to go back to my David and Goliath aspect. I said that the framing, which we all have to deal with and we need to be aware of, the first and main element is that the violence is because of occupation, and then the ambassador and I can sit down and have a whole discussion if it is occupation or it isn't occupation, and it's disputed land or it isn't disputed land. Do you know what a terrible conversation that is on the media? It's one where you're not going to, not just on the media, and I say that in the sense that if somebody comes and says to me, it's all about the occupation, and I'm going to say, no, it's not the occupation, and then we're going to have a whole discussion about occupation, that's not going to change Israel's international media image, because what we're talking about is the occupation. I add into it a second element, because the visuals, as I said, the symbol of occupation is the bad Israeli soldier. But that symbol, and that's the second strongest aspect of Israel's international Swedish media image today, is the fact that the image is based on a very strong Jewish Christian image. I already mentioned it many times. It's called David versus Goliath. Only David is the Palestinian, and the Israeli soldier, remember him, the one who's the symbol of violence, the one who's the symbol of occupation, he is now Goliath. Now, to me, in its own way, it's even worse. Because in the in the biblical description of David and Goliath, for those who go up and open up their scriptures and read about it, you know how Goliath is represented? He's wearing body armor. He has on a helmet. He has a weapon. So Goliath looks like the Israeli soldier. What does David look like? He doesn't have any armor on, and he's holding a sling. So that all of the visuals for the last 25 years now, this isn't about right and wrong. This is about changing that perspective. Now, I want to be clear. Israel is very strong. We are a sovereign country. We have a standing military. We are fighting, defending, trying to defend both Israeli citizens. It's not exactly an easy occupation. And I meant it actually as a profession, but it can work with both ways, right? But when we talk about these visuals themselves, about the David versus Goliath, when people think of Israel, they think of the conflict. When they think of the conflict, they know, they've been told this for over 25 years, that the reason there's violence is because of occupation. The symbol of occupation is the soldier, and the soldier is the bad, bad Goliath. That's what you have to contend with. Now you have to start the dialogue, because that's the basic framing on every single one of your media outlets, on the print, on the traditional, and in the social media. And the question is, how do you break out of those very strong images? And now I'm going to add in the last one, and the last one is going to make the two first ones look easy. And when I add in the last one, this is really the yoga stage, okay? I apologize up front, right? Because the last element of Israel's, and this I want to remind you that the subject here is Israel's international media image in your media, both in the social and in the traditional, in social media and in traditional media, the visuals themselves, which are such a strong impact, that when I see the pictures, when I hear Israel in the media here, I know violence, I know conflict. The connection is to the occupation. The symbol of the occupation is the soldier, and the soldier is Goliath. And the last element within this web that I'm weaving is in the issue of victims. And I apologize up front, this isn't easy, but it's one that I want you to be aware of. In the world of the images, there's a very strong impact to being the victim. Okay. Now I want to be clear. In the media, when you meet the victim, I'm saying this now slightly academically because it isn't academic, you may feel sorry for the victim. But worldwide, people don't like victims. Okay, victims don't make people comfortable, but they feel sorry for them. Victimhood is a very challenging place to be in. Israel is not a victim. Israelis are not really victims. We're a sovereign state. I'll go back to that first one. We established a state against all odds in May of 1948. Every 10 years, we've built ourselves, we've grown in numbers, we've built an amazing economy, we're at the forefront not just of Nobel Prizes, but of other things. And I say that right now because when we look at these pictures, what we don't always understand is the impact of victimhood. Most Israel advocates in the last 25 years, when we're talking about the Israeli-Palestinian dynamic, when we're talking about Israel within the arena, we, and I say this also of myself, I stood up in uniform more than once and in suits on every TV channel you can think of, and we blame the other side, or we put the responsibility on the other side. Okay, that's more important. We put the responsibility on the other side. But what are the terms that we use? We blame the Palestinians. We don't necessarily blame the Palestinian president, the head of the Hamas, the Palestinian Hamas terrorist organization, or the Azadin al-Qassam brigades. No, we do it more general because we don't have a lot of time. You get 20 seconds on TV. What does that mean we're doing? We're standing up. We're the ones who are strong. We're the ones who have a sovereign army. We're the ones who are accountable and we're responsible. As I said, we're sovereign. And we're blaming what is clearly the victim. What does it mean to blame the victim? Now I'm going to do something so rude, okay? Everybody, I apologize up front, okay? Galit, I'm using you and I apologize, okay? I am now going to blame the victim, okay? Because that's what we do most of the time when we think about it, when we're not thinking about the words. Look at it, it's your fault. Look at the way you're dressed. That's called blaming a victim, okay? But what did I just do? Did I totally take it out of context? But in the world of victimhood, when you blame a victim, then not only are you the occupier, not only are you Goliath, you're mean, you're inhumane, you have no heart. And we do this most of the time. And in a world like Sweden, Essentially what we're doing when we apply the responsibility and the accountability to the other side, a victim is not accountable and not responsible. Now, I'm not here right now to give you the answers on how you bridge that gap, but I want you to be aware of the gap. Because once you are aware of the fact that when you are blaming a victim, basically you're immediately telling everybody that you're mean and cruel, because they're a victim. How can you blame them? If you want to hold them accountable and responsible, you have to be clear about who, because victims are not accountable and not responsible. You need to phrase it in a different way. You need to approach it in a different way. Otherwise, you're becoming cruel. I know that it is not an easy subject. I know that it is one that for many people makes them very uncomfortable. But to me, it is the hardcore issue that if we realize it, we actually can really change the argument. Because once you step out and you don't just overwhelmingly blame the issue of accountability, the issue of responsibility, but you step out and look at these three issues, violence and occupation, the David and Goliath, and the issue of victimhood, you actually can come out and address these issues with a new bridge, with a new way. It's very challenging, but it's out there to be done. I'm going to end with lovely pictures, right? Okay. The Second Intifada. We're in 2013. People have very short memories. And I say that because lots of times we want to pose things in a historical context, and I'm there too. Okay? I mean, 1948 is relevant in the historical context because it's been so taken out of it, 1967, etc. But I'm looking at the Second Intifada. Why? Because in social media, and I'm going to be, again, I apologize for being rude. It's my American background. It's being Israeli, right? But I'm going to be rude and say that the bulk of people here don't use social media in the same way that some of them here do, okay? Age 40 and under, let alone 30 and under, let alone 25 and under, use social media in a different way than we do. It's a question of age and of culture and of, we may and may not get there, but I most definitely see a difference. This isn't about good or bad, but a difference. But people who are 30 and under, this is already ancient history for them because it happened 10 years ago. And if you're 30 and it happened when you were 20, or if you're 25 and it happened when you were 15, that's a long time ago. I look at the Second Intifada, and for me it was yesterday morning. When you want to come and frame again the issues that I'm talking about, you need to be aware of the fact that the Second Intifada has already turned into history. I talk to people right now who present the Palestinian Authority, who present the newly rebuilt Palestinian Authority, and it kind of goes like, there was this process in the 1990s, and basically the Palestinian Authority was reborn in 2005. Those 5 years in the middle, of 2000 to 2005, are very important in the framing. Not because I want to go down the road of violence, but because of the context of the setting. And every once in a while I need to remind the different people that it isn't a given that people remember they don't know anything about 48 or 67, but they don't actually know the context of Israel-Palestine of the last 20 years and not even of the last 10. The last point that I'm going to make. Israelis and Palestinians for the last 2 months have been sitting down and negotiating. When they sit down and negotiate, they're negotiating about the exact same, they have it on the slide, but I'll leave it for a moment. They're negotiating on the exact same 6 core issues that they've been negotiating for the last 20 years. The 6 core issues are very clear. I'm going to tell you them, yes? Borders, that's the one that is simple but not easy, okay? Simple in the sense that it's clear but not easy. Well, first I'll say the 6. Borders, security, settlements, sovereignty, refugees, and Jerusalem. Those are the 6 core issues. Israelis and Palestinians, and here I'm showing the Second Intifada, and I could go backwards and forwards. Israelis and Palestinians, Israel and Palestine, the Israeli officials and the Palestinian officials are addressing those 6 core issues: borders, security, settlements, sovereignty, refugees, and Jerusalem. Borders are clear. I'm not going to say they're easy, but they are the ones where there's a line. Nobody's going to like the line. But when I say that nobody's going to like the line, 67 line, 49 line, 47 line, I could give you different lines at the end. It's a clear-cut, tangible thing that we can touch. Security is the exact opposite. It's untangible. How do you define security? So security is directly connected to sovereignty. The more security Israel needs, the less sovereignty a future Palestine will have. The more sovereignty the Palestine gets, the less secure and security Israel will feel. Some of it also has to do with feelings. As I said, it's a non-tangible with a tangible. It's something you can touch without touching, because I can clearly tell you what it means in less sovereignty. They won't have a standing army. They won't have an air force. But I don't know how to tell you what it means in terms of security for me, because there will always be victims of terror, because there will be terror no matter what. But when I took those 3, and I add in that settlements are a direct result of the ones I spoke about before. You define the borders, the security, and the sovereignty, and thus you define what will happen to the settlements. And I'm not here again to say good or bad. I'm just giving you the way it works around. And then I get to the last 2, Jerusalem and refugees. And when I get to the 2 of Jerusalem and refugees, I get to the ones that are in the heart. And when I say in the heart, for Israelis, for Israeli Jews, Jerusalem is the heart. Remember Zionists and Zionism, and we're in the Zionist Federation, and Zion, why do we call it Zionism? Zion is another name for Jerusalem. It's at the heart. Israelis don't give on Jerusalem, or not. For the Palestinians, the refugees for the last 65 years have been the heart. This isn't about my saying if this is good or bad. Right now it's about the images and about the implications. I have no idea if we will resolve the issue. I have no idea which way we will resolve the issue, but I do know that if they arrive at a resolution of these 6 issues, every single one of us here, every single person both in Sweden and in the world, will be looking at them and saying, yes, no, good, bad. Does it end the occupation? Does it not end the occupation? They're going to be using it within the same framing, in the same terms that they've been looking at Israel for the last 25 years. I've used up all of my time. We're going to hear now more about what we can do about it. I tried to give a framing and some ideas of the challenges in dialogue that you have, both in written and in print and in social media and in conversations, in the gaps in perception between the sides. And I leave at this stage and we'll go on to the next one. So thank you very much, my very polite Swedish audience, right? Okay.
Thank you, Mary, for this really full of history story. You tried to exhaust the inexhaustible, I think, with words and times and history and media and social and new and old. So really, thank you very much for this. Our next speaker came all the way from Jerusalem. She is the Vice Director of the Department of Public Affairs in Israel's Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Previously, she served as the Counselor for European Parliament Relations at the Israeli mission to the EU. Galit will speak on new challenges of Israel's public diplomacy, from advocacy to marketing. Please welcome to the stage Galit Peleg.
Good evening. First of all, I want to apologize. I came a little sick from Israel, so because of the Israeli winter, you know. So I hope I don't choke in the middle of my presentation. I'm going to need the laptop, so 2 minutes, okay?
I'll take advantage of these 2 minutes to correct myself because I've not mentioned the WZO in my opening of this evening. Thank you very much, Saskia and Daniel that is behind.
In the media, and what we are trying to do, what I would like to do this evening is actually to present to you what we're trying to do in the ministry, those of us who are dealing with public diplomacy and of course all our embassies, and also at the end of my presentation maybe to suggest to you a few tools that you might use also here in Sweden. I defined the title of my presentation as New Challenges to Public Diplomacy because I think the times that we're living now in are really times that are changing all the perception of a lot of things. Information is much more open to and accessible to everyone. And it has its good things and bad things, and the more we know how to use it, also the new concepts, we can use it for our benefit. So the situation we know, the image of Israel we know. We did some thinking or rethinking in the last few years in the ministry to see how we can deal with these challenges. And I would like to present a few challenges at first and then to see, to present to you what we are doing. So, first of all, I want to dedicate 1 minute for the word hasbara. I imagine that most of you know it. When you hear hasbara in Hebrew, literally it means explaining. Now when you talk about hasbara as advocacy or as public diplomacy, that we are trying to change now the word hasbara to public diplomacy, even the title of my department, we are trying to change it. It's because when you are defining this whole doing behind or activity behind the word hasbara, sometimes it sounds a little bit apologetic. I did something and now I have to explain why I did it. Sometimes it sounds a little bit patronizing. I'm doing something, you don't understand what I'm doing, so now I'll explain it to you. Also, it means that I will explain to you whether you are interested in what I'm doing or not. And I think this was the concept for many years by official Israel, is to explain to every audience the same messages, the same presentations about Israel's policy, Israel is doing in every field. And today, one of the conclusions that we came to, and I will show it to you later on, is to try to talk to people about things that are interesting for them, and this way also to get them to listen. Another thing is, and it's connected to what I just said, is the question whether you have to agree with each and every action Israel does in order to be a supporter of Israel or to support Israel. You can support, you can be, supportive in one action, you can be a critic towards another activity of this government or another government. Does that mean that you are pro-Israeli or anti-Israeli? I don't think so. Another question is, and this is I think something that we are really asking ourselves for many times, that after 65 years we're still talking about legitimacy of Israel. Can you imagine India was established 1 year before Israel? Does anyone in the world ask himself whether India has legitimacy to exist? I mean, we're not talking about whether Israel should do this or do that, whether, you mentioned the issue of the settlements, okay, but the question whether Israel has the legitimacy to exist, this is something that is quite amazing, that after 65 years almost, we are entering the 66 years of the existence of Israel, and we're still talking about legitimacy. And the last thing, maybe this is too strong, maybe I should have written it in a different way, maybe more delicate, but there must be something challenging or problematic with the way that we are approaching audiences if for, you said 67, but I mean after, sorry? Okay, from 87, we do have some challenges that we have to see how we deal with them. Now, what I'm going to suggest is to expand the dialogue beyond the political issues. I am not saying that we have to neglect the political issues, but what I'm saying, if you, I don't know if in Sweden the Mad Men was so popular as in Israel, but there is one sentence that I liked very much that Don Draper, if you watched it, said. He said once, if you don't like the conversation, change it. So I'm not saying change the conversation, but expand it and try to approach people really through issues that are interesting to them, that matters to them, that are important to them, and through that get their attention to talk about also the things that you want to convey to them. I talked about a targeted audience, and I'm talking about more focused messages that are suitable for these audiences. And I will relate later also to more updated methods, whether referring to technology, but also to perceptions. So the two things that I want to put more emphasis this evening are, one is the campaign of branding Israel, and the other one is using the new media. Now regarding branding Israel, now I will need the other presentation, you can help me. In the last 8 years, the Foreign Ministry is working on a strategy how to brand Israel. One of the things that we find a lot is that when you say to people, Israel, people that are not dealing with Israel every day, people that are not necessarily pro-Israeli, against Israeli, pro-Palestinian, anti-Palestinian, when you say Israel, automatically they think about the conflict, they think about a war. I can tell you that even two weeks ago we had a very nice project that maybe Uri can tell you one day, that we brought young entrepreneurs to Israel, also from Sweden, and some of them called to ask whether it's safe to come to Israel, and I mean they know that there is no war right now, but still they expected, and even those that came to Israel 2 weeks ago, they told us that they expected to see more soldiers in the streets. They expected to see people, you know, they didn't expect to see people sitting in cafes. I mean, all of you know that this is not the situation in Israel, but this is the image. So what we are working on is that this process of branding Israel is, the thought was how to present Israel as we know, as we the Israelis know it. So the process started around 2005. We actually hired a British company that specializes in branding countries, and they did a lot of work, a lot of surveys, and they asked people in Israel and outside of Israel, what is the image of Israel? And after a very long research, they filterized all these answers, and they came to some, let's say, three main issues that they think that characterize Israel, both the way Israelis think about themselves, and also what people think about Israel after they get to know Israel. I'm going to show it to you very briefly. The objective, can I take it out? No. Yeah? It will be easier to... Oh no, okay. Sorry, I need this, so... just briefly, what are the objectives of branding? I guess some of you can't see the screen because of me, so I apologize for that also. You can see it's for unity and consistency of the message of the brand, clarity and focus, highlight cultural assets, direction and support, and coherency. Now, what are the main challenges that we see when we come to define what Israel is? So when they ask people, especially outside of Israel, what Israel is, the first images that they think of Israel, so the answers were, it's a very chauvinistic society, mostly men, no women. So that's why we were so happy when Miri was representing also the military aspect. And so I said, like I said, so chauvinistic, very militant. The second thing was that Israel is very gray or black and white, not colorful, because when you see it only one dimension, so this is what you see. The third thing was the image is that Israel is very religious. I can tell you that from my personal experience, I lived for 4.5 years in Brussels in a mission to the EU, and I remember one day I went to donate some blood, and the nurse asked me if this is mine, and I said, I don't understand the question. And she said, after she asked me where I'm from, and I said, I'm from Israel, she said, is this yours? I said, what, mine? She said, the hair, because every woman that she saw in her life, and she wasn't that young, in Brussels, was very religious, and it wasn't her hair. And she was amazed that there are some Israeli women that still carry their hair. So, and I'm talking about Brussels 2010, not some. Another thing that came up with these questions was the technological advanced character of Israel. But all in all, when they had these, they had also some focal groups that they asked people about different countries, so that because they didn't want people to know that the survey is about Israel, so that the answers will be as objective as possible. And one of these phases that they did, they asked these focal questions, the focal groups. If each country was a house or home, what would you expect to see in this home? So when they asked them, if you enter an Italian home, what would you expect? Those people said, a lot of noise, good food, music, big family, big mama shouting at everybody. They asked them, what would you see in I don't know which country? And then they asked them about Israel, and the image was a bunker. Like I said, just men, no women, very militant, very gray, a bunker. Now we know this is not Israel, but the image is not welcoming and not fun. Now, when we're talking about branding Israel, we're not talking about the people that are obviously involved in things that has to do with Israel. We're trying to reach people that don't deal with Israel in everyday life, and let's say the places that they meet Israel is maybe one headline in the international news. Now, also in questionnaires and surveys that this company did for us in Western countries, in Europe, also in the United States, they found out that more or less they found out that about 15 to 22% of people were, you know, sometimes I have this dilemma whether to say if it's anti-Israeli, whether is it necessarily pro-Palestinian. I don't think so, but this is how they defined it, so I'll leave it like that. So I would say anti-Israeli about 15 to 22%, and pro-Israeli about 19 to 25%, which actually leaves the very big bulk in the middle of around 60% of people that don't have necessarily an opinion about Israel. And these are audiences that we would like to approach with the image so that the image that they will get of Israel won't be the only time that they see one headline in the international news or a picture, like you said, because this is very strong, especially if you have no knowledge of Israel. And this is actually the targeted audience of all this campaign. Now, the three I want to go really quickly about the three main themes that they defined after a lot of work of what Israel is about. One thing is building the future. One thing is building the future. Those of you who visit Israel, those of you who follow Israel, you see that there's a lot of thinking in Israel all the time, both on the next generations, also infrastructure. There is always a thought what Israel is going to be like in so-and-so years, and the whole, you have the feeling that the whole present is always towards what Israel is going to be like in few years. Also in regards of any settlement that will be with the Palestinian state, without the Palestinian state, what will be the political options, what will be the economic options. So there is a lot of thought about the future. The second thing that is very strong in Israel is the vibrant diversity. Israel's society is combined with Jews, Muslims, Christians, Druze. The Israeli Jews themselves came from all over the world. You find this diversity in the culture, you find it in the food, you find it in the music. Everything is a lot of fusion, and it's quite unique. And the third thing that everybody pointed out is what they call the entrepreneurial zeal, which is this feeling that everybody is an entrepreneur in Israel. Everybody is creating something new, and you find it very vivid running in the veins of every Israeli. It can be someone who deals with high tech, but it can be your taxi driver that is thinking all the time how to improve the way he's dealing with things, and you find a lot of entrepreneurs. I can tell you that last week we had a very busy week in Israel. It was mainly in Tel Aviv, and it was all about entrepreneurship and about innovations, and people came from all over the world, companies, investors, startupists, and it's something that is very much alive and vivid in Israel. So these are the three trends, and when they try to combine everything together to have one message that you can say, this is Israel, they came up with this creative energy. Now this creative energy is actually the message that we are trying to convey and to add to everything that we do in the last few years. Now the way we do it in the ministry is we bring a lot of journalists, reporters, but also bloggers. We bring them to Israel. We expose to them things that are going on in Israel. There are a lot of startups. If you come to Tel Aviv, those of you who visited Tel Aviv, only in the Rothschild Avenue area, which is something like, I think, 2-3 kilometers long, maybe less. Less, huh? Maybe 1 kilometer, 1.5. Give me 1.5. So you have about 700 startups. I remember last year I visited with someone who's in charge of that in the municipality of Tel Aviv, and it was very typical. Most of them are starting, I imagine here it's the same, in a small apartment, 5 nice young geeks, each one with his laptop. And after 6 months, I visit the same guys after they were bought by eBay. Now they have very nice office in the Rothschild. And it says eBay R&D Center. And their offices are much nicer, but there's the same 5 nice geeks with laptops, but much richer now. And you can find that a lot in Israel. There are many international companies that open their R&D centers in Israel, and when you ask them why, they tell you that there is a very good reason, because the vibe in Israel is, one, is the character of the Israelis, and two, is that it's very much encouraged by the government and by the other authorities, the municipal authorities, the state authorities. So this is something that is very much existing in the Israeli character. If you look into it, you can find entrepreneurs from biblical time, but we are trying to concentrate and bring these journalists more to nowadays entrepreneurs. We're trying to add to each visit in Israel, even if it's a visit of a president or parliamentarians that are coming to Israel, to expose them to this scene of startups and high tech. There are a lot of events and conferences in this level, and also a lot of emphasis on innovation. Actually, Israel has become, like, after the Silicon Valley, quite an important place, and there were a lot of articles, especially last week. I followed the international media because of these events that happened in Israel, in Tel Aviv. And you could see a lot of quotes from economic journals, and in New York, in Berlin, in London, that are saying that Israel is a place to be if you're an entrepreneur. And it's very, very nice that it's being recognized by the world. And there are a lot of exhibitions, new media. I will refer to it later. I want to add just one more thing about the visual language that was created to support this campaign about branding Israel. I want to show you how it looks, because what we did, I'm going to skip here a lot of nice photos. You will recognize, oops, yeah, I know. The idea is that Israel, the brand Israel, should not talk about creative energy, but to be creative energy. And one of the elements is also this visual language. We hired a company that's called Open, and they are the designers. What they designed is the first ever user-generated brand identity. The idea is that we are going to actually we created a kind of application that is going to be on the website from, I think, the end of next month, that everybody can use it. What it's dealing with is that each person can create his own logo in this language. It will be in the same family. I will show it to you in a second so you know what I'm talking about. But it will be individual, so it will be creative. What we created in this language is actually, we have different fonts in different colors. Each one can choose his own font and his color, and he can use it. If you're doing something about Israel and you want to use a logo of Israel, you can create your own logo, but it will still be in this family of the logos. It looks something like that. You can see here this logo was created by our ambassador to the UN, Ron Posso. He did it in the last year's ambassadors conference in Jerusalem. Now, if you look at other logos, so you can see that each one can choose his own logo. Today we improved the fonts, so they are much more sophisticated and nice. This was the first examples. And this is what the application will look like. So everyone can choose his own logo. Actually, I'm going to skip these slides because they're not interesting. What I want to show you is that together with these letters, actually we have all the letters. At first we created only the Israel letters. Now we have all the letters in English and also some letters in Hebrew. I mean all the letters in Hebrew, but with less fonts. The main idea is to reach out of Israel, so that's why it's in English. But we created also some graphic elements, and those of you who can read Hebrew can see, because we wanted to create this connection to Israel after all. So you recognize this letter, Aleph. So this is the graphic element that I created. You see this Shin. Also, can you identify this letter at the bottom? The Tzadik Sofit. And so on and so forth. And I'm just going to show you what it's going to look like. The idea is that this language will be used in exhibitions, in websites. You see, this is an exhibition in a train station. Etc., etc. Now I want to go back to the first presentation, because I want to talk about the use of new media. תודה. כן, זה בסדר. זה בסדר, פה אני אסתדר. כן. New media actually opened new possibilities for Israeli public diplomacy. One of the main things that we had to deal with, and we still have to deal with, is what we call the gatekeepers, editors or journalists that actually are not very interested to put on the media the Israeli point of view. The fact that you have today social media, you have Facebook, you have Twitter, you have so many possibilities, open the possibility for Israel to present its own side and maybe to balance the information that is out there. So now also it also makes it possible, the new media, it makes it possible to bring the information to people wherever they are. You don't have to ask them, okay, open the newspaper and read this article in this and this newspaper on this and this page. You just bring it to where they anyway are, which is Facebook, which is Twitter, which is other media, so new media places. And they don't have to do anything, they don't have to be active to get you the information that you want to convey. Another thing that it made it possible to, if it's okay that I'm standing on the cables? Okay. It made it possible to target audiences. I mentioned before the targeted audiences. If I want to, if there is something that Israel does in, I don't know, it has to do with biking, and I want to approach the people that live in Stockholm and ride bikes. So I can do that through the new media. I don't have to publish it in general newspapers and to hope or assume that somebody will open this newspaper and will see it. I can target exactly to them. Now, a few facts about the use of new media by the Israeli Foreign Ministry. So actually, the Israeli Foreign Ministry was the first foreign ministry to use social media. I wrote here a few examples in Facebook, in Twitter, in YouTube, both from Jerusalem and also in our embassies. So in Jerusalem, we activate 5 websites in 5 languages. You can see them here in Hebrew, in Arabic, in English, in Russian, and Persian. Around the world, we have additional websites of all the embassies. All in all, we have more than additional 60 languages that we have the websites, the official websites. In Jerusalem, we have 15 Facebook pages that are dedicated to different issues. We have Green Israel that deals with ecological issues. We have political issues. We have different cultural page, and I don't remember all the 15. And all in all, around the world, we have 2 million followers, which is a nice number. And I don't think we could have reached that only through newspapers. Now, one very important thing that the new media opened for us is the conversation with the Arab world. We have in the ministry, we have, like I said, a website in Arabic. We also have a Facebook page in Arabic. And what happens is that in many Arab countries, every website that ends with .il is blocked. Now, when you use Facebook, it's much easier to go around it so people can reach it. Now, the advantage of having an official Facebook or website in Arabic is that we can approach people that will probably never get the information from any other source if they read only the sources that are available in their countries. Also, the very important thing is that it opens a kind of interaction with these people, sometimes with vis-a-vis the administrators of our websites or our Facebook page, but also sometimes it opens a very interesting conversation and dialogues on the Facebook page of Israel among themselves, either from the same countries or different countries, different Arab countries, I mean, and also they are raising questions towards their own regimes. I can show you one example. Is the issue of the Syrian wounded Syrians that are being treated in hospitals in Israel. This is something that was published on our Facebook page. You can see that it got more than 200,000 likes and about 735 shares up to the date that I copied that page. I don't know how many today, and it opened a very interesting conversation in Arabic between the readers and the followers from Arab countries. How come Israel is helping these wounded people? What about our countries? How come we don't help our brothers? And this is something very interesting that you can do only through the use of new media. And now I'm going to summarize actually with some suggestions how you can be involved through this. One thing is what we call coalitions. Other people's voice matters. When an official website of the ministry or the embassy publishes something, it sounds reliable, but sometimes it's a problem to be credible not because of the information, but because of the excuse me. Because you say, okay, it's an official, of course he would say that. If it's an Israeli diplomat that says something, gives a message or gives an information, a message, okay, but information says, okay, he says it because he is an official. But if you take this information, if you share it, if you relate to it, then it sounds more credible that there is a kind of conversation around this information, and it creates a kind of a coalition that is talking about the information that was published. And this gives it more credibility to people that are outside of these immediate circles that are connected to the official sources. Another thing is participating in forums. There are different forums in the new media today that you can take part. We can help you to inform you that it's going on, but it's very important that the participants of these forums will not be the official sites, of course, the websites, but people who are talking as personal people, individuals, because the new media today is about individuals. People want to know what this guy thinks and not what the organization or the state behind him thinks. And it's much more reliable and sounds more sincere if you take this information and you join a forum, and you express your opinions, and you can, of course, add whatever you think of this, it's much more reliable and it makes more impact. Wikipedia. I want to talk 2 minutes about Wikipedia. Wikipedia has become today a source of information. We started... Yeah. It's a battleground, but we cannot deny the fact that sometimes... students, even in high school, they just copy what's written in Wikipedia, and for them, this is what used to be for us, the encyclopedias when we were students. There are ways to influence, there are ways to balance, and it's very important to be involved. If there are people who are especially interested about this, so you can approach me afterwards and I can talk to you about this specifically. And the last thing is that I want to present to you is something that's called Israel Likers. Israel Likers is kind of a program that was developed especially for us by a group of people. Their name is DataPro, and we're working with them a lot for different issues on new media. And what they developed is a kind of a tool that we can use to recruit and encourage people that are dealing with Israel and they are positive towards Israel to support Israel. It doesn't have to be something political. For example, if there is a call for a boycott, an artist that plans to come to Israel and he gets many calls, don't go to Israel. And there has to be something to balance it. So they can send you an alert that something like that can happen, and then you can just vote with one click that you are supporting his arrival to Israel, and you can increase immediately the number of people that are calling for him to come. I will switch to their presentation in very quickly. What they are showing here, it's in Hebrew because I just copied their slides just to be brief. But the idea is that they say if it's a big fish, it will eat the small fish. But if you have many small fish, they can eat the big fish. Now, how can we do that? This is an example. You all know about the flotilla. These are the pictures that were very popular in the media. Now, what they said, what we should have seen also in the media were these pictures that in Israel we showed. What happened to the soldiers? Now, through this tool, you can very quickly get this information and spread it and forward it, and you can create the big amount of small fish effect. Now, this tool can give you an email alert. It can give you a Facebook alert. It can give you automatic share in Facebook if you want, if it's an organization. What it can do also is actually it sends you a kind of a message. For example, like I said, about an alert about a singer that is being boycotted because he wants to come to Israel. You get this alert. You can change the signature for your organization or for your name, and you can send it to your mailing list or to your Facebook friends, and you will not see any kind of signature of who sent it to you. I mean, you will get the alert, and you can use it as your own to send it to the whole world. It can be that, it can be a vote for an Israeli candidate for a sports committee, international sports committee or whatever. It can be something like that, which is political, like the flotilla. It can be used for different things, and you can just decide whether you want to use it this time or not. So if you would like to use this Israel Likers, which makes it much easier because you just get alerts immediately that something is happening, then you can choose whether you send it or not, whether you use it or not. Then I will give you my email address. You can send it to my email address, your email address that you want to use, and then our digital diplomacy department, they will contact you to this email. They will add you to this email list, And then every time there is an alert, they will send it to you, and then you can use it whether on your Facebook or on your email. That was really brief about some things that we do. I hope it can help you think about things that you can do. And if you have questions, I'll be happy to answer. Thank you very much.
I'm really sorry, but we don't have time for questions. We do have a break, so you can definitely pose them during the break. Thank you, Galit, for your colorful and proactive insights. It was really, really wonderful. And the thing with the letters, I think it was really, really decorative. So we will now take a break of 30 minutes. Yeah, almost 25 actually. Food and drinks are served. They are right behind you.